Welcome to this episode of The Square. I am really excited to have Nate DeVore, who's the vice president in the commercial sector and the project manager on the Wells Fargo Las Colinas campus project, which is convenient because that's what we're talking about today. So thanks for being here, Nate.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I
So,
like your vest.
oh, thanks, man. I like your vest-ish. I mean, mine kind of doesn't come together in the middle, and yours looks way better.
Yeah.
So that just is what it is. But so Wells Fargo, it kind of stood out to me as a different kind of commercial project for a very specific reason that we will get into in a second, cliffhanger. But tell me a little bit about some of the stats of the project, size, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so the project itself it's located on Lake Carolyn in Las Colinas, which is just right next to the Toyota Music Factory, across the lake from Williams Tower. Across the lake from Williams Tower. And it's about 850,000 square feet of office with a 4,000 space parking structure
Okay.
across the promenade from the actual
Right.
campus. So yeah, it's a big one. It took us a long time to finally place the buildings where they are today. A lot of studies,
Yeah.
a lot of working with Wells Fargo.
I remember we came out and shot some drone of it too to give them kind of a site perspective and be able to figure out where stuff was going to go.
Exactly. Shot some drone. We did some massing. They put on the headset, walked across the street. They got to see what the buildings look like.
That's
And
cool.
finally, it was approved. So
So the uh, the pursuit of this project, walk me back to the very beginning of the adventure.
yeah, so the RFP came out. I want to say RFP came out in 2019.
So
So
right before the pandemic, perfect timing.
right, and then it was on again, off again, on again,
Yeah.
off again, and it took about 3 years to finally come to fruition. And when it did, it was still the same, but everybody was more comfortable with the team and the site.
Was the site already picked when the RFP came out, or was they still looking at different sites?
They were still looking at different sites.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what went into picking the site that ultimately became its home?
Well, the site itself is actually nestled quite nicely with a lot of multifamily development around the lake. That's in Las Colinas. It's right next to the Toyota Music Factory and all the restaurants there.
Yeah.
It's backed up to the Dart stop,
Yep.
so a lot of their employees or visitors can get on in the Dart, off the Dart fairly easy, get to the
Yeah.
airport. So it was very ideal for them, and the land itself was available. There was nothing on it, and
It's kind of a prime location.
it is a prime location. I just wonder why it sat vacant for so many years,
Yeah.
because it was done in the 70s.
So what were the challenges that they were trying to overcome in order to select this site over the other ones?
Right. I think the challenges were very apparent that this is basically a brownfield site and there's nothing on it. The only thing that we had to do that was probably the biggest challenge in the beginning was to fill in a portion of the lake.
Mm.
So that was the first time I've ever filled in
A lake.
a lake. It wasn't that much, and it allowed us to uh, put the next phases, which is another two towers, right next to the first phase.
Got it. Okay. So sustainability and kind of the environmental initiatives were really important to Wells Fargo. Was that something that was apparent up front from the very beginning with the RFP, or was that something that kind of came out of the design development process?
Yeah, it was part of the basis of design for the owner, which is not uncommon right now with a lot of these financial institutions. They're all making a big push to go to net zero, um, lead platinum, but
Right.
mostly net zero. And you're seeing a lot of that up in the Northeast. A lot of their power comes from dams, hydroelectric energy,
Hmm.
as well as the Northwest. But here in Texas, we don't have that.
Right.
We have solar and we have wind.
Hmm.
So when we hear net zero, we automatically thought, okay, but we're going to be building a wind farm or a solar farm somewhere off-site,
Right.
or they're going to buy green energy.
Right. And it wasn't just they didn't want just net zero, they wanted net positive.
So after sitting with them, going through some visioning sessions, we realized what they really wanted was net zero on site.
Right.
And then that slowly drifted into, well, we want to be net positive. We want to be 5% above what we use.
That was one of the things I really liked about this project. So tell me what net positive means.
Right. So net positive is essentially we produce more electricity on site than the building consumes in one calendar year.
Got it. So I've got to imagine that's a difficult thing to do with smaller projects. It's a real challenge with a project that's, 800,000 plus square feet.
Correct.
When you, as you said, it kind of drifted that direction from net zero. What was going through your mind? Like, okay, how do we pull this off?
Yeah, our first thing was like, we're going to need more land.
Yeah.
Luckily, we had it, and so the first step of figuring out how to become net positive is to figure out how much energy you use.
Yeah.
We had to run those energy models.
So were you basing those models on their current usage, or what were those based on?
We were basing the models on how efficient can we get the equipment,
Yeah.
and then assuming that they're going to have hours that are 8 to 5, and then so we'd say 7 to 6 roughly
Right.
is how the building's going to be controlled.
So just to set the stage, are we what are the numbers we're talking about power wise, like specifically?
Specifically, we're producing. Well, we need about 9 million kilowatt hours a year,
That sounds like a lot.
and we're yeah,
Yeah.
and we're producing 9.6.
So is this, I mean, this has got to be up there in terms of projects in Texas or the country in terms of commercial being net positive.
For a commercial office, when we first dove into this process, we asked ourselves, okay, what's the lowest EUI in Texas? And then how many net zero office buildings are there
Yeah.
in Texas? And, we have some here at Corgan that we've done with schools, but schools are also out of school for the hottest
Right.
months of the year. And they also use a lot of geothermal. So digging into that from a state and national level, we discovered that in Texas, there's only one other one. It's in Houston, and it's 18,000 square feet. So and it's a research facility. But at a level of where we are and the size of this building, 850,000 square feet, there's not one out there.
Not just Texas, but in the country.
In the country.
Wow.
Yeah, at this scale for office. Now other buildings, yes,
Sure.
but for
an office,
corporate
this is
office,
the biggest one
this
in the
would be
country.
biggest one, yeah.
So that's a huge deal. I mean, the biggest office building in the country that's going to be net positive.
Big, yeah. Very
That's
huge.
crazy.
Yeah. It was now that's based on our research.
Sure.
That's what we found.
Well, I'm sure the hundreds of thousands of Square episode viewers will be able to do some extra research.
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm wrong, let me know.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about the process of getting to net positive. So like you said, you figure out, okay, these are going to be our hours. I'm imagining the number of employees plays into that.
Mhm.
It's a multi-phased project. So what's the process to get to that final number that you have to hit?
Right. So you run your energy models.
Right.
You get the best equipment. We knew what we had to do to begin with is we have to get efficient equipment, plug that into the energy model. You have to assume man hours a year, and that's based on head count and hours of operation. So a curveball
Yeah.
that we got along the way was there are some floors in the building that will operate 24/7.
Oh,
So that moved the
a
needle
little
quite
bit.
a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other one was car chargers. So we ended up having to find more opportunities to put photovoltaics on the project in order to offset some of that.
Got it.
But after you figured all that out, then you gotta make your building completely electric, and that's what we ended up doing. So we have a kitchen that had some natural gas early on in the
Yeah.
project, but when we heard net positive on site, we switched all that over to fully electric kitchen.
Are you seeing a trend, kind of leaving the Wells Fargo project for a second, because you're working on a lot of different projects? Are you seeing a trend towards both the idea of being net zero, but also taking into account things like energy storage and whatnot on site?
Funny you should say that. We just had a meeting last week about a possible day two battery storage.
Hmm.
So on days like today, where it's cloudy out and rainy, they could actually tap into the battery and and use some of that to shed the load from the
Yeah,
towers. Now the battery couldn't you know support the both towers at one time,
sure.
but it could help eliminate some of the burden that the buildings would have on the grid.
So the 5% that's above, that's the positive,
Hmm.
that's being fed back to the grid?
No, it's not. Right now, it's not being fed back to the grid. I mean, the Encore's in the market of selling energy,
Sure.
not buying it.
Not buying it.
Yeah, so that's why we wanted to be net zero. The 5% just gives us a little bit of a buffer in the
Got
event
it.
that our calculations might have been a little off, a little tolerance, if you will.
But this is, like you said at the beginning, this is over the course of a year. So on any given day, especially if there was energy storage available, it would be a plus or minus basically.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. But carbon reduction is another big one that I don't think is going to go away anytime soon. You're going to see more and more companies make a commitment to having net zero carbon as well. And that was something that was, with Wells Fargo was very important to them early on
Yeah.
is how far they didn't know, but how much carbon could we reduce out of our project within a typical project.
Yeah.
So we did our analysis on that, and overall they were pretty pleased.
Does the majority of that come down to like building materials and whatnot?
Correct. So the superstructure for the towers are concrete.
Hmm.
The 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 4,000 car parking structure is concrete. And so when we did our evaluation and looked at all the building materials on the project, our big swings were going to be with the concrete.
Yeah.
So we went in and said, okay, what can we do with the concrete to reduce as much carbon as possible from the concrete?
Yeah.
And we discovered that by switching to like a Portland limestone cement type 1L,
Hmm.
that it had more of a natural um, uh, clinker in it. So clinker is what's really energy consuming when it comes to concrete.
Right.
So we just removed that and replaced it with the Type 1L Portland cement, and it got us there.
Awesome.
Yeah. So or got us to where the client was happy.
You made the decision to do photovoltaic solar panels.
Hmm.
I'm imagining we're intentionally decided against some other things like wind or geothermal. What went into
Correct.
those decisions?
Well, wind is we have to get on those big industrial levels that you see going out towards
Amarillo,
Amarillo.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Las
And
Colinas didn't want a few of those right in the
no,
middle of
they
there.
they didn't like the idea of having, those just
I can
around the
understand
lake.
that. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
And then in geothermal, geothermal can be it's a great, but at the scale of
Yeah,
850,000 square feet, you're going to need a lot of wells, and it's just a lot of maintenance over
yeah.
time that can get really complicated and expensive. So they elected to not go down those paths early on in the project.
So you've got your number. How are you actually able to hit that number?
Right. So we got the number. We settled on an efficiency, a panel with an efficiency that was fairly new to the market. By the time we actually went to purchase it, probably
Yeah,
right down the fairway. And so then we just started looking for opportunities. At first, we said, let's just cover the ground,
yeah,
and the city really wouldn't go for that.
yeah. I bet.
And they weren't certain that we weren't certain that they were going to go for us putting it on top of the buildings. They had a policy that they don't want to see photovoltaics on buildings because they drive around and they see it on a residential application and they don't like the way it looks.
Got it.
So we crunched the numbers and we realized if we just put solar panels on the towers or the roofs of the office buildings, it's not even going to get us close when you
Yeah.
factor in all the shadows. And so we said, what if we just lifted the solar farm above the roof for the two towers,
Hmm.
maximize it, cantilever the roof, the the footprint of the building a little bit,
Yep.
and then let's just cover the garage, just like we did on Toyota.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that got you to your number.
That got us really close.
Okay.
When they asked for us to be 5% above
Came
that
in.
zero,
Yeah.
then we had to go back in and add some assembly space,
Okay.
dining facility, and stuff like that, and that got us to our number.
So is it 100% photovoltaic?
Yes,
Okay. So
yeah,
wind
100%.
wasn't even part of the equation.
It would have probably like powered a toaster or something.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're obviously working collaboratively with the client. They've got this challenge. You figure out how you're going to get it done. Did it affect design decisions in terms of, I know you mentioned a few of how you were going to fit all the panels on the site, and on the towers, but was there any pushback on how it would affect the design and the exterior look of the building?
Yeah, so conceptually, we like the idea of the skin of the building kind of having this rippling effect on
Mhm.
it because it tied it back to the lake, of course.
Right.
Um, so one of the things we did is when we got into the production phase of the project, is we really wanted to optimize the skin, not have
Yeah.
so many random panels, so that we could, get it within budget. And so what we did there is we did a solar analysis of the skin. So we did there was a solar analysis of the skin, and we found out where there's certain spots during the day
Hmm.
that we had significant amount of glare, and then we just put a solid panel
Yeah.
in those locations to simply put that whole process. So that was one way that we cut back on the amount of energy we used, because another thing we did was we have narrow floor plates.
Okay.
We drive in more natural light into the building. That
So you're
way,
using less artificial light,
you're
basically.
using less artificial light,
Got it.
and that's all tied to uh, the dynamic glass that we eventually could put in
Yeah.
at the very end of the project.
So that's
Light it.
actually similar to what we have here
Correct.
upstairs in the
Correct.
skyline. So tell me about the dynamic glass.
So the dynamic glass, as the sun hits the building throughout the day, the glass will actually tint. On a cloudy day, it'll be clear. So glass will actually tint. On a cloudy day, it'll be more clear. The same thing if the sun hits a building next to you, and the reflectivity of that building comes off and shines, just like it does in our office.
Got it. So it has like kind of an active sensor.
It has an active sensor, the dynamic glass, the lighting, all talk to each other.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the modules for the dynamic glass are somewhat limited,
Yeah.
and so we were asked to change from normal format glass, which on this project we had large format glass,
Right.
to a module that would accommodate dynamic glass manufacturers. So we had to add more mullions and kind of
Got it,
change
yep.
the datums of the glass and everything. And that was really a owner driven request. At the end of the day, they said, no, we want to have this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there other ways that the kind of goal of net positive affected the interior design and how the workspace works?
Not really. It was really about how much energy that we can get per year.
Yeah.
How much, the EUI, how far down we can get that in order to not have to purchase as much solar, right?
EUI being,
Energy usage intensity.
you could have said anything and I would have said, yeah, that's
Energy use intensity. One of those.
I'm good with it either way.
Yeah. It's basically how much energy a building uses per year.
Got it. And so when you think about the phases that come after this, are those already positioned to be net positive as well?
Well, we'd have to get more solar. So
Yeah.
we'd have to do a lot more, but we haven't talked about that. It's more of a, what if down
Yeah.
the road, 10 years, but they want to be able to have enough land there to expand if needed.
So you just topped out like in the last couple of weeks,
Just
right?
topped out. Yeah.
What are the next milestones towards seeing the building finished and actually getting to test the net positive.
Yeah, well, we're sitting here. It's April. It's raining outside.
Yeah.
We just topped out. We're trying to get the thing dried in, so it's been a real challenge with the weather we've had.
It's been a wet spring.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't see it drying up anytime soon. So, no, the contractor's doing a really good job of keeping the building dry inside. We've got gear in there. We've got things that'll be sensitive to water.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get the glass up as quick as possible. We're just about finished with the precast on the building's envelope, and so once we get those two things complete, the roof is mostly done right now. We'll be all dried in, and we'll start seeing interiors, um, interior partitions, and all the finishes going in.
So when is the current handover date?
Yes, substantial completion is going to be September of 2025. So it's been a challenge.
Yeah.
The first 3 months of the project, there was a article of cultural significance found on the site.
Oh, really?
Well, it wasn't. They didn't really find anything. It was back when they dug the lake, in the 40s.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
They never cleared the record that there was. I guess it was a hammer
Okay.
from
Way, way, way back when.
yeah,
Yeah.
caveman or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. But we had to clear it with the Army Corps before we could break ground.
Sure.
And it took about 3 months, and then we were asked, of course, to find 3 months in the
Yeah.
schedule. So we ramped everything up, fast tracked it, got the 3 months back out of the project. So
I'm guessing you'll have almost probably weekly or monthly indicators towards that net positive percentage before you hit the end of 2026 to see, hey, did we actually hit the 5% number?
yeah, so there's going to be, let's say, a sunny day. You have X amount of solar panels. You have how much energy are you producing? And so during the commissioning process, we're going to find out if our assumptions were correct or not. And if it's way off, there's got to be something wrong. So let's go back in there and figure out what's going on. Maybe we missed a panel or two or 80.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's going to be some of that towards the end with the solar and with the glass. There's going to be a huge commissioning component to that to make sure everything's functioning correctly before the Wells Fargo takes the building over.
That's a great insight into this project. I'm really excited about it. I'm excited to see it once it's done,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you probably are too.
Bring the drones out there.
There we go. We'll get some good drone
Yeah.
footage. Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for watching, and make sure to check us out next time.